This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's episode where you will learn about caregiving, a journey of selflessness, responsibility, and love. My guest today is Sarah Cart, who was raised and educated in New York and New England. Sarah began her career with local publications writing while she raised 4 sons in northeastern Ohio with her husband, Ben. As empty nesters, they relocated to the Florida Keys and then spending summers in the Pennsylvania Poconos, allowing them to maintain lifelong family ties. The COVID-19 pandemic and Ben's health challenges required them to stay in Florida throughout 2020. Following Ben's miraculous recovery, they cherished their time with family and friends even more. Sarah's written a book entitled On My Way Back to You, which chronicles her caregiving journey. Sarah, I'm so pleased to have you on the show because I think caregiving our loved ones is the most overlooked, huge thing that we can do for one another. And I know you and I have similar experiences and feelings around this subject matter. Tell us a little bit about the story of you and Ben.
Lisa, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Ben's and my story is one that started in the winter of 2016, 2017, when he was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And as it progressed from symptom to symptom, the doctors had said it's incurable, so all we're going to do is treat the symptoms. At first, that was really easy. But that summer, he dropped about 35 pounds without thinking about it. And we realized that this was going to be a little tougher than we had expected. And over the course of the months that followed, I realized that he was driving the car less. I was driving the car more. I was the one taking the notes at the doctor's appointments. While he was starting to nap, I became the one who was handling all the telephone appointments and reports. And fast forward, it got to his heart, put him in congestive heart failure. For a while, a pacemaker was the solution. And then about 9 months after the pacemaker went in, the doctors said that really Ben's only chance for survival was if we were to get him a heart transplant, which is its own journey, trying to get somebody onto that kind of a list for an organ transplant. And we started running those hurdles. There are a lot of them. And we had not finished, although Ben was very obviously dying as it got to be the winter of 2019, 2020. And he went into kidney failure 10 days after the COVID pandemic was declared.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he went off to the hospital. And I didn't see him for 10 weeks. And during that time, he finally got on the list for a heart transplant, then was removed from the list because he wasn't stable enough, removed on Good Friday, put back on the list on Easter, which felt like the universe was giving us a message. And 4 days later, he was unstable again. They were about to take him off the list again when a heart became available. That was the first major miracle. A week after he got the heart, the doctors called and they're giving me reports on all sorts of things. And at the end of their 10-minute spiel on blood pressure and oxygen levels and his mental capacity, which wasn't great at that point, the doctor said, "Has anyone mentioned this fractured left hip?"
Oh, no.
And no, in fact, nobody had. But I knew I could say to him, it didn't happen on your watch. I'm sorry. I think that must have happened on mine. Ben was sleeping so badly as he was getting so ill before he ended up in the hospital that he couldn't sit at his desk without falling asleep. He couldn't walk across the kitchen without falling asleep with his hand on the refrigerator door. And what had happened in this case was he had been walking back to the couch that he was sleeping on because he'd been falling out of bed. He'd been walking back to the couch from the toilet. It was about 15 feet, and he had fallen asleep and fallen over. I had not heard it happen in real time, but I asked him a few days later why he was taking ibuprofen like they were jelly beans. And, oh, well, I bruised my hip. So that's what I could tell the doctors. What it meant, however, while he was in the hospital was they couldn't do anything about it because he was recovering from the heart transplant. He wasn't strong enough. They needed him to come home to me, and they promised that they would fix the hip about a month later. And because of COVID, it turned out to be 2 months that he was home in a wheelchair, unable to walk. It was a caregiving journey for both of us.
Wow. So, what an incredible story. And at the same time, it sounds scary, and it was difficult and very, very long. When you think about patients who go on to lists to be transplant recipients, the wait time was actually fairly quick for your husband, which is miraculous.
Yeah, there are several reasons for that. One is that we forget that at the beginning of COVID, the tests were taking 4 and 5 days to get results. And so the only people who were being taken into the OR at that point were emergency situations, a gunshot wound, a car accident victim, or in Ben's case, someone who's dying but needs an organ and happens to be in the hospital. They weren't calling people at home and saying, you've been on the list and we've got a heart for you. Drive in right now and bring your overnight bag. They weren't doing that. So he was in the right place at the right time. If he hadn't been, I don't think he would have been a candidate. I think if they'd known about the hip, he wouldn't have been a candidate. And I'm the kind of person who I consider my having let that hip thing happen on my watch and not knowing about it to be a failure. But part of what this has taught me is sometimes miracles come out of failures.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a story. And I think, so many of us at this point in our lives, and I'm going to put the point in our lives between, let's say, mid-40s to early, even to mid-70s, because people are living longer, find ourselves sort of in the middle, like an Oreo cookie, where we've got children, young adult children, and elders that we're caring for. And there is no one else, nor should there be anyone else to care for our loved ones. As long as we're around and we have the capacity to give the care, we give it. But there's a price, or a toll. And that's what I would love to get your feedback on as well. Like the toll it takes on the individual, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it.
I'll start by pointing out that there's a quote from First Lady Rosalind Carter, which you may or may not have heard. I had not heard it until sometime in the past year. But it's that she theorized that there are 4 kinds of people: those who are caregivers, those who have been caregivers, those who will be caregivers, or those who will need caregivers. And
I have not heard it, and that's fantastic.
But we don't talk about that. No. I mean, if you're going to be one of those things, it feels kind of like you should have some heads up, a warning that situation, that potential exists, like 100%. Unless you are taken out by an asteroid, you're going to be in that situation, one side or the other. And the other part of that, for me anyway, is we got married young. And relatively. And you have all this idealism when you step up to the altar and you say, in sickness and in health, and for rich or for poor, it's all so poetic and romantic. And then there's the reality.
Violins, the candlelight.
Yeah. Cue the music. But the reality is sort of staring you in the face of, oh my goodness, he's in a wheelchair. How am I going to get him from point A to point B? Oh my goodness, he's in a wheelchair. How long is he going to be in a wheelchair? Do we stay living in this house, or should I be finding someplace that can accommodate this situation. And the decisions from moment to moment, day to day, week to week can be everything from the largest, like, do I need to sell the house, to the smallest of, how am I going to get this pill into him if he's not keeping things down right now? It's just the magnitude, the spectrum that you're on, the roller coaster is daunting. So,
not to mention the lack of self-care that goes on as well, because you're in it and you're trying to triage and prioritize.
Right. And you have to
there are
remember,
only so many hours in the day, right?
Yes. And it's the sort of classic cliche. You do have to put on your own oxygen mask.
Yeah.
And some people get really frustrated when you say that. But if you don't have your oxygen mask on, you're no good to anybody. I heard a statistic a couple of weeks ago that something like 50% of caregivers predecease the patient. And that number is higher.
Wow.
It's higher if people are in their 70s. I think if they're in their 70s or older, it's like 70%. And when I was told that, I stopped and thought, well, yeah, my dad predeceased my stepmother. They were both in their 90s, and he was bound and determined that he was going to stick around and be there for her. And that didn't happen. And I thought, Ben's parents, my father-in-law predeceased my mother-in-law. Similar. It was just really eye-opening.
Astounding.
Yeah. So you have to take care of yourself.
And let's talk about some other stats. I brought them up here. So there are approximately 43.5 million caregivers that have provided unpaid care to an adult or child in the last 12 months. 34.2 million Americans have provided care to an adult age 50 or older in the last 12 months. The majority of caregivers, 82%, care for one other adult. So it's just one person, while the rest care for two or more adults. It's pretty amazing. But you're right. Rosalind Carter was right? We're all going to be in that position, whether we are the recipient or the giver of the care. And the economic impact or the value of what's given in that care is tremendous as well. That says that this is an older statistic, in 2013, the estimated value of caregiving provided, unpaid caregiving, was $450 billion.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. And that's not only are they not being paid for their caregiving, but they're probably not doing something else for which they would be paid.
Yes, yeah. Which puts an economic strain on many families, not all, but I would say most, right?
Many.
Someone's got to provide the care, and oftentimes it's not economically feasible to outsource that care to a paid provider. So a family member provides the care, which means that they're not bringing income into their household, which further creates stress because you've got now two people who are out of work.
Right. Yeah, it's an overwhelming thing. And it's, as I said earlier, we don't talk about it. It's like the man behind the curtain. You just don't look over there. Don't pay any attention to that. That's not anything you need to worry about. And in fact, we do.
It's scary. It's really scary. We do need to worry about it because we will all walk that journey at some point, which is the point.
Right. Or maybe not worry about it, but be aware of it, be prepared for it, be strategic and rooted and ready to take it on, because you're going to have to. So
let's talk a little bit about the qualities a caregiver almost has to cultivate by default in order to get through it, right? You might not recognize yourself necessarily as that gritty, resilient, hardy person at the beginning of the journey, but by the end, by gosh, you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to tell people you are strong enough to get through this. That's not necessarily true. You don't know that at the beginning. You don't know that you're strong enough. What you need to hear is you are going to get through this.
Yes.
It's like, only 50% of your audience maybe can understand this, but it's like being pregnant. You're pregnant. The only way you're going to get through this is the other end. But God gives you 9 months to prepare for what's going to be involved at the other end. And by the other end, you are so ready for it. And the caregiving curve, sometimes it's very steep and you have to learn it pretty quickly. But similarly, you get stronger as you work your way up that curve. The more you know, the easier it is. That's not quite the right word, but the more you know, the more capable you are of handling it. So you will get through this, just one step at a time.
Well, I think that's also a really good point. And I think of the old adage, how do you eat an elephant, right?
Exactly. One bite at a time.
One
Yes.
bite at a time, right?
Right.
Because otherwise it's so overwhelming, holding the welfare of an adult, right, in your hands, in this case. Mm-hmm. It's daunting, right? Making sure that you get the medications right, you the medical history right, all of the things. In the case of your husband, right, who was in kidney failure, right? That was like another layer that you had not anticipated to the story, and everything that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you just have to take it one piece at a time. It's the elephant.
And no, we're not alone. I think that being able to talk with others who have been caregivers, that have empathy and compassion and understanding for the situation, is really helpful. I mean, it gives strength.
You have to accept support from wherever it comes from. And some people, it can be awkward. They don't know what to do, or they don't know what to say. And you just need to be forgiving of the awkward moments and appreciate the generosity of their hearts and maybe guide them. One thing that had been suggested to me was, keep a list of things that people can do for you if they say, what can I do? And similarly, you can also keep a list of things you can do for someone who's in the caregiving situation who hasn't wrapped their head around making that kind of a list yet. It can be things like steal their car and go fill it with gas for them.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Whenever you see a buy one, get one thing, buy the extra and take that extra tin of tomatoes or whatever it is over to them with dry pasta. And so they've got stuff in the pantry if they are out of a way to make a meal. Those kinds of ways of accepting support, those ways of providing support are invaluable.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Sarah Cart. We're talking about caregiving, a journey of selflessness, responsibility, and love. Her book is On My Way Back to You, One Couple's Journey Through Catastrophic Illness to Healing and Hope. To learn more, please visit onmywaybacktoyou.com. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back.
Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support, because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back, continuing the conversation about caregiving, a journey of selflessness, responsibility, and love. Let's get back to it with Sarah Cart.
So, Sarah, let's talk a little bit about sort of being in the eye of the storm, in the middle of it, and the awareness of the exhaustion or the brittleness, as we were discussing on the break, and how to reconcile with that, because we can't give up our role, right? We have to keep on keeping on,
right? To
see the story and the recovery to the end, or the story to the end. And yet here we are, exhausted.
Yeah. For Ben and me, his coming home from the hospital was a huge adjustment. Obviously it would be, but he was coming home from having 24/7 undivided attention of medical personnel and janitorial staff and the nutritionists, and 3 hot meals a day being delivered on trays directly to his bed.
On time.
on time, exactly, and hot, and suddenly he came home, and because it was COVID, he came home to me, just me. I was his chauffeur, chief cook and bottle washer, laundress, butt wiper. I mean, all of it. It was all my responsibility. And I'd been well tutored by all the various personnel before he came home. But it's one thing to say, oh, I can do that. Yes, I can have breakfast for him by 7 a.m. and I can have his pills in him by 10. And then you get into the reality, and the phone's ringing and the dog's barking and something's broken, and whatever. His pain level is such that you get distracted. So we had people supporting us from near and far, and nobody could visit, but we were blessed to be able to do Zoom calls. And we did Zoom calls with family. We also did Zoom calls with his best friends from college, his roommates and their spouses. And we have done this. Actually, my first Zoom call was the night he went into the hospital. Ooh. Which is a little bit like trying to remember what it was like before I knew how to read. I can't remember what life was like before I knew how to do a Zoom call. But we're on a Zoom call with his college friends, and he just turns it up and turns it on for them. And because he's hard of hearing, he's on one computer in his room, and I'm on a computer in my office. And I dialed in a little late because, I'd been, leaving a glass of chilled water by his side before I went down to my office. And I get onto the Zoom call, and I look at everybody, and I look at Ben, and Ben looks great. I mean, he really, for everything he'd been through, he looked amazing. And I look at me, and I looked absolutely wiped
It's
out.
not funny, but I do get it.
It was, I was like, oh my goodness, he looks his age, and I look old enough to be his mother. I was flabbergasted. And it was this realization of, I need to be meditating. I need to be sure I'm sleeping. I need to be taking care of myself. And it was just a real eye opener to see how visible the strain was. And I think until I saw how visible it was, I didn't realize how much I was feeling it. So.
And I would argue that the caregiver also needs a little bit of caregiving themselves. Like, as a caregiver, we become pretty skilled at taking care of most things, right? We have to become uber efficient. And if we're working during the time that we're giving the caregiving, in my case, I still was working. Although during COVID, it was during COVID, I was in the home. So that was fantastic, but I still needed a little pampering, and I don't know, didn't look like much at the time, but maybe it was going out for a walk in nature for an hour just to have a breath.
Yes. When I am stressed, my go-tos are going for a walk, like running away, or journaling and breathing, and meditating in a real crisis. And during this, I had the time, because it was COVID, to really meditate. With the journaling in particular, I would take my problem, and I wasn't consistent about this, but the point was to take the problem into my journal and to spew out everything that I needed to spew, and then to somehow bring it back to something calmer, something more positive, something more affirmative. And I really did. I took to writing at the end of my entries, "Let's go, me," or, "Let's go find those bootstraps," or "It's time to put on the big girl panties," whatever. It just something,
it's true.
Something I would have wanted. If I were watching someone go through it, I would have been trying to say it to them to lift them up and help them move forward. And so I was making myself do that for myself, which is not a natural thing. Not for me anyway. But it was really helpful.
To cheerlead yourself, like, you do have this.
Yeah.
That you are carrying the water for two people during a health crisis, which we're going to be out of time soon. So I want to make sure that we get to some tips for our listeners who might be experiencing a health crisis themselves, or that of a loved one, and find themselves in this caregiving position. What are some top tips, besides some of the ones you already talked about making the list of things where people could offer assistance? But there's some other tools that we can employ.
One is, don't hide your vulnerability. Be honest about it. Don't use smoke and mirrors to say, "Oh, everything's fine, we've got it all under control." Because if you don't, and it's not doing either one of you any good. Another is when people ask how things are going, don't exaggerate or sugarcoat it. That's a little bit like the smoke and mirrors. But you don't want to have to walk things back if circumstances change. And a huge one is to be kind and supportive and forgiving of yourself. This is really hard, and you're not going to do it perfectly. You might learn from your mistakes, but it's a tough row to hoe, and you're going to just have to be forgiving and let yourself have some slack, cut yourself some slack. Friends and support networks are really helpful and important. If you've got one particular friend or two particular friends that you can just call when things really are wretched, to just, please let me, what is it? Do you want to be heard, hugged, or helped? And sometimes all you want is to be heard.
Yeah.
Please just let me spew. And you don't need to repeat this to anybody, but I just need to get this off my chest.
The zone of silence.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's, sometimes you really do want the hug, or sometimes you really do need the help. So you just need to recognize to be heard, hugged, or helped. What else? The journaling, the walking, the meditating.
Journaling,
yeah.
I want to mention something about the children too, our younger children, when we're in this space. And I don't know how you felt about this, but for me, it was important not to sort of whine to the kids about this, like to not make this predicament or journey or tough spot be theirs.
Right. No, I tried very hard not to. I tried very hard to spare them without lying to them is too strong a word. I needed them to be aware that their father might die, but I didn't want them to obsess about that. I needed them. I just needed them to support me, and however this was going to go. It comes back to, we are going to get through this. We may not get through it with Dad with us at the other side, but we need to stick together and get through this.
Which brings me to talk about the level-headedness that I hear in your voice as you express this. Your relationship, my guess is, underwent its own transformation during this time. And I would love for you to close out talking a little bit about that.
Ben and I were very lucky in that his needing care started so slowly, and we geared up to it. And in many ways, he cared for me too. When it became obvious that what he had could kill him, he would say to me, "What scares you about being in this dimension without me?" And we'd have really frank and honest conversations about that. And he actually spent a lot of time, for lack of a better description, giving me a PhD on how to manage our household, our finances, insurance, all the things that he'd always done while I was always managing children and pets and groceries and Christmas and birthdays. And so it kind of leveled the playing field's not quite the right word, but we got better at each other's roles. If all he could really do was sit in bed, he could be ordering birthday presents and managing some of those things while I was out figuring out the insurance or the taxes. And at the end, after all was said and done, he did say to me about 2 months after he got home from the hospital, he's like, you did a great job with all the desk stuff. Our credit rating was higher. All those kinds of things I had learned. I said I had a great teacher. So there's an expression from everything you ever needed to know, you learned in kindergarten. It's like a lump in the oatmeal is not the same thing as a lump in the breast. Our variation on that is, hey, look at me doing reciprocal steps. Ben had to learn how to walk again. And when he came home, the day he learned how to go back upstairs, left, right, instead of 1 foot and catch up, 1 foot and catch up. I can't remember what we were snipping at each other about, but he stopped and he walked over to the stairs and he said, hey, look at me doing reciprocal steps. And it puts everything back in perspective of, that bit where we're snipping about, did you mail it? No, I didn't. Did you? It's not important. Yeah. It can go in tomorrow's mail. So
don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Yes.
Which is, I think, the silver lining, the gifts of this very difficult situation. And Ben's doing well today.
Ben is doing so well that more than frequently he irritates me, and it's wonderful.
Yay, go Ben.
Yes.
On
like,
brand, irritating the wife.
Right. Am I annoying you right now? Yes, you are. And it's wonderful. Thank you very much. So, yeah.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us, sharing your story, which I find so inspiring and a little less alone, as I think about that period of our lives, which it's a boomerang, right? It's cyclical. It will keep happening. And
yes.
The reminder that we will get through it. We have the muscle to do hard things.
Yep. Yeah. Lisa, thank you. This has been lovely. I've greatly enjoyed talking with you too.
Likewise, myself as well. We're talking about Sarah Cart's book, On My Way Back to You, One Couple's Journey Through Catastrophic Illness to Healing and Hope. To learn more, please visit onmywaybacktoyou.com. Thank you, Sarah.
Lisa, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Sarah Cart, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.